Welcome back to Packet Loss. In this episode, I'm going to be covering the ins and outs to URL filtering and URL categorization. I'll be building off my previous video in this series, so with that, let's get started. URL filtering is definitely not a one-size-fits-all for most networks, so you need to be able to adjust your security posture accordingly. Before we actually start allowing and restricting domains, we need to understand the differences between URL filtering and categorization from a Palo Alto standpoint. URL filtering is what allows us to permit, deny, or modify existing access for users to domains, as well as prevent malicious activity from taking place. This can range from credential harvesting to phishing and JavaScript exploits. Palo Alto uses predefined categories on URL filtering profiles to help administrators restrict based on characteristics of domains. URL categorization comes into play when you want to be more explicit to control access to certain websites as to not restrict the entire category as a whole. They work completely in tandem with each other, and today I'll be covering a few use cases to effectively secure your network. In our last video, LAN web browsing is the security policy we created to define LAN traffic to the internet. We'll be building upon that by applying a URL filtering profile to this policy as to more explicitly get control on what's being accessed on the web. To do that, we're going to start off by clicking on the Objects tab. On the left-hand side, you'll see Security Profiles. Under that, URL Filtering. We're going to be clicking Add on the bottom left and building a brand new URL filtering profile. We're going to name this one LAN URL Filtering. And under the Categories tab, you'll see the predefined categories by Palo Alto. I'm not going to be going over what you should be doing in each of these, as each network is different, so adjust these accordingly using the drop-down options if you click on these to your either your company's preference or your personal preference on your network. Once our URL filtering profile has been created, navigate to the left-hand side. Under Custom Objects, you'll see URL category. Click on that. And from here, we're going to be building out two URL categories. In this case, it's going to be a whitelist and a block list. As the name implies, one is going to be to allow access to certain websites, whereas the other one is going to be to deny access to those websites. So let's create those. Once our custom URL categories have been created, navigate back to your profile that you just created as well, open it up, and under custom URL categories, you'll now show the block list and the whitelist that we just created. The values on these are going to be none for site access and user credential submission. So what we're going to be doing is changing these to match the values of what we are trying to accomplish today. So under block list, we're going to change the value to block. And under the user credential submission, you'll notice that if you select block, it's going to default to block on this side as well. For the whitelist, we want to allow this. And on the user credential submission portion as well, let's allow it. And click OK. Now that we've created our custom URL categories and our custom URL profile, what we want to do is navigate back to our Policies tab and open up our LAN web browsing policy. From here, go to the Actions tab. Under the profile setting, click the drop-down, click on Profiles, and from here, let's click on the URL filtering drop-down, and we're going to click on the one we just created, so LAN URL filtering, and click OK, and we're going to commit that change. So now we can test. For our test today, I'm going to be using the domain wine.com. Before we actually access the website directly, let's review two ways we can actually check the categorization of the website through the GUI and through the CLI. The first method is quite simple. Go back to your Objects tab, go to your profile that you created, and then from here, on the left-hand side, on the bottom left, you'll see Check URL Category. If you click on this, it's going to take you to the URL filtering test page on paloalto.com. So for our domain, wine.com, enter it here, click on the CAPTCHA, confirm you're not a robot, and click on search. So from here, it's going to give us the predefined category by Palo Alto for this domain. So in our case, wine.com comes back with alcohol and tobacco. If we go back to our Palo Alto, if you scroll down, you'll notice alcohol and tobacco is being allowed and permitted. So from here, let's cancel out of here and let's go to the CLI. The test command we're going to be running is test URL. If you tap through this, it's going to be asking you what is the value of the domain. So in this case, it's going to be wine.com. And once I hit enter, wine.com is going to come back with alcohol and tobacco as my category. So to actually test now, let's open up a new tab and go to wine.com. As we expected, the website loads and is being allowed. What we actually want to test now is our block list actually going to deny access to a specific domain or subdomain once we enable it? So let's go back to our firewall. Under the Objects tab, go back to the URL categories. From here, block list, and let's create a brand new domain in the site list for our block list. So it's going to be wine.com. And to cover any subdomains, we're going to add an additional site, and we're going to wildcard it, .wine.com. Keep in mind, on the bottom, it will actually specify your exact match criteria for URL categorization when you're defining your domains. So please pay attention to that when you are building out your domain list. So click OK and commit those changes. Now that our change has been committed, let's open up a new tab again and go back to wine.com. As expected, the website is now being blocked, and you're seeing our custom URL category that's actually blocking it. This confirms that our block list is working as intended. Keep in mind, the block page we're seeing right now can be modified to your preference. However, I'll be going over that in a later video, so I'll link the KBS article to that for anyone interested below. One last thing to mention, when you are checking against URL filtering logs, whether it be for a whitelist or a block list, be sure to check against your URL filtering logs themselves. On your Palo, under the Monitor tab, URL filtering, under logs, you will see your logs listed in much greater detail. In our case, we were testing against wine.com, and it's hitting against our custom URL category for the block list under the predefined category for Palo Alto being alcohol and tobacco. On the far right side, under the Action tab, you're seeing the action is block URL as our web page was being blocked. One thing to note on this, these logs can be incredibly useful if you're troubleshooting website access and are trying to confirm if a user is being allowed or denied to a specific domain. In later videos, I'll be covering more in-depth log analysis, so be sure to be on the lookout for those. A relatively new feature on URL filtering profiles is inline categorization, also known as machine learning. If you enable these features, for instance, the local inline categorization, this is going to dynamically protect against JavaScript and phishing exploits, whereas the cloud inline categorization is going to offload logs into the cloud for real-time analysis and then send those logs back to bolster your local inline categorization threat indicators. This is a great feature if you're trying to stay ahead of the curve. However, it is relatively easy to enable these features, but keep in mind, in a production environment, this may result in false positives. So use your best discretion when enabling these features. In conclusion, I hope this video helped you learn how to create and maintain URL filtering profiles and categories on your Palo Alto firewalls within your network. I've also included some helpful KBS articles below to help you with troubleshooting the features that I went over. I look forward to all the topics I'll be continuing to cover in this series, and if you have any suggestions, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching.